Revealed my brother's ancestry test results, which showed no relation to me or our family, unraveling a mysterious biological twist. I am a 27-year-old woman, my brother is 20, we were born in Venezuela, but our parents are 100% Galician, Spanish, and we have lived in Spain for almost 18 years now. We moved when I was 9 and he was about 2. I took my test almost a year ago and was obsessed. I loved all the information it gave me. I persuaded my mom and my first cousin, my dad's brother's daughter, to also take it months ago. I wasn't able to convince my dad, but I finally managed to convince my brother to take it. He doesn't care about this kind of stuff much, so I promised I'd manage it for him, and when I got the results, I'd do a reveal for him, kind of like a gender reveal for babies. Well, I got the results on Tuesday and I haven't been able to tell anyone the results. I've talked with Ancestry customer support and they told me the results are right and it is the correct person, but that they're looking into it. Anyway. Basically, my brother doesn't appear in my matches. And in my brother's matches, I don't show up, and neither does my mom, and neither does my cousin from my dad's side. In his matches I only see people I've never heard of. None of my matches show up in his. His ethnicities are different too. My mom has 60% Portuguese, for example. I got 40% Portuguese. I think my dad has a bit too, and that's why I got more than 30%. My brother doesn't have any Portuguese at all. Another super weird thing, he has 44% Indigenous Americas, Colombia and Venezuela. My mom doesn't have that. I don't have that. My cousin, dad's side, doesn't have that. Another thing, my brother has 12% South Italian. I don't have any Italian and neither do my mom or cousin. I'm freaking out because it's not like my mom cheated, because then at least he'd be my half-brother and related to my mom. He can't be adopted. I was 6 when my mom was pregnant with him. I remember all of it. I remember them telling me she was pregnant and that I'd have a baby brother. I remember hospital visits. Hell, I remember when he was born. When I held him for the first time in the hospital and he was so tiny. Could they have done an egg and sperm donation thing? Does that even happen in Venezuela in 2004? I am 100% sure I am biologically my parents, so I know they aren't infertile. Or weren't when they conceived me. Could simply Ancestry have lied to me and got the wrong person? I am so confused. Has this happened to anyone before? I am scared of asking him to try another DNA company because I don't want him to ask why. I am scared of telling my parents in case I reveal some huge secret, but my mom seemed normal when she knew my brother took a test. I don't know what steps to take moving forward. Edit, I will address some comments here. He's never had bone marrow surgery. Many people have asked if my brother looks different from my parents and me. This is something I never questioned because I had no reason to, but my brother has darker skin than us. It is darker but not enough to ever think he wasn't biologically related to us. His nose certainly is different and so is his mouth. He is shorter than my dad and me, but taller than my mom. He is the shorter guy in our family, but I think he's still growing. Hair texture and color is very similar to all of us. Curly and brown hair. Though his hair is darker. Ours is much lighter. My dad is almost blonde and I have very light brown hair too. His eyes are very dark brown. My dad has green, my mom light brown, and I have hazel. When it comes to personality, he is just like my dad. Nothing stands out about his personality in terms that would make me think he isn't biologically related. He is and will always be my brother. I don't care about DNA. He doesn't show up as a match for me at all. I search his name and he doesn't appear. Neither do I show up in his matches and neither does my mom. There are no CMS shared. Update 1. I will address some things here. My brother did not prank me. I saw him spit in the tube and I myself put the tube into its box, and later on I personally put it in the post box. The saliva in the tube that I sent was 100% his. A few have mentioned that it is weird that we have such a big age gap and that possibly my mom stopped being as fertile by the time my brother was born. I was an accident that happened when both my parents were 19, so my mom was still pretty young when she had my brother. It is indeed possible that she wasn't fertile and used an egg donor, but if that happened, I'm sure it wasn't because of her age. As for the results not being my brother's and it being an ancestry mistake, many of you pointed out things that I hadn't thought about. Like, if I got someone else's results, then that somebody would have got my brother's results. Therefore, I'd have matched with him, anyway. And I didn't, so nobody else got his results. The other thing is that if it was a random person's test, it really would be a crazy coincidence that the results are of a Venezuelan and not a random European or Asian. It's too much of a coincidence that it's Venezuelan DNA. The consensus seems to be baby swapping in the hospital or informal adoption because my mom's baby died. A few have said fake pregnancy before an adoption, but I felt the baby kicks with my own hands and face, so that one isn't right. I don't know what it is. I have been mentally preparing myself all day. Tomorrow morning I will call my mom and ask her directly if they had any help conceiving him and or if he's adopted. Those two would be the better options. If it's neither, well, let's just hope it's one of those options. Thank you all for your messages. It really means a lot. You're the only people that know that this is happening, and it was a nice feeling to let it out and have so much support. Many have asked for an update, so I will try to come back here if I get answers. Thank you again. Hola. Of course I heard the baby stealing stories too, and my parents barely let me go alone, but I can't imagine my parents not being careful and keeping an eye on the baby at all times. But I don't know. I don't know if my brother was ever taken away from them after birth. It's possible. I haven't told my mother yet. I'm trying to figure out what could have happened. I really think he isn't adopted. So I'm scared that 1, they used IVF or something and it's a secret they don't want to share, or 2, something else happened that they don't know. Update 1. As many of you, and Ancestry customer support, pointed out, it was unlikely that the test was wrong. It was much more likely that the test was right and that there was something else going on. Namely, that my brother really wasn't biologically my brother. I talked to my mom last Saturday. I'd planned to just call her on Friday, but I was really stressed out and nervous and hadn't slept at all, and needed to work. So I figured it made more sense to wait for the weekend. Plus, I wanted to talk to her face to face. I preferred this, and I think my mom would prefer this too, considering the topic I wanted to talk about. Those are all irrelevant details that I don't know why I'm explaining. I'm sorry. Soon after I got to my parents' house, I got my dad to go buy me some stuff in the supermarket, and used the time alone to ask my mom if she remembered weeks earlier when I got my brother to do the test. It had happened in their house and my brother had struggled to spit, so it was memorable. She said that of course she remembered and asked me if I finally got the results. I told her that yes, I got them, but that the results were strange. She asked me what that meant, and then I directly asked her if my dad and her had used fertility help to have my brother. I guess something in my tone and face freaked her out because she suddenly got very serious and said something like, "No. Why are you asking that?" So I told her that the results showed that he wasn't her biological son. And he wasn't related to me, or my dad's niece, or anyone that she and I had matched with on Ancestry. And that it was very weird, but DNA can't be wrong, and I asked her if he really was theirs biologically or if they used embryo donations or if he was adopted. Basically she was in disbelief about what I was saying and she said the test must be wrong and of course my brother was hers. I showed her my brother's results, the ethnicity estimates, I opened my app and showed her my matches and compared, etc. She simply didn't believe any of it. She said that it was wrong. I reminded her that she and I matched with some second and third cousins that we knew. That I matched with my paternal cousin. I told her that it is not wrong. That companies lie and they suck, but it's not lying about this. Matching people with DNA is very easy and final, and they have no reason to lie. I explained how I spent so much time talking with Ancestry support trying to figure out if there was a mistake and they assured me there wasn't one. I explained to her also how my brother's results couldn't have got mixed up with someone else's because what were the odds of getting a Venezuelan person's results and not just some random person from the US, since that's where most clients are. At this point she was freaking out and shaking and confused, and I 100% believe her. She is being honest. My brother was conceived naturally and she gave birth to him. When my dad came back I told him the same thing and asked the same questions. The same argument as before happened, except it was now the two of them. He said he is theirs and that the test is wrong. Anyway, my mom was angry and crying and my dad was very serious, and I finally brought up the possibility of my brother being switched on accident by nurses at the hospital. I was the first to say it out loud, but obviously everyone had been thinking it. They denied that they were given another baby. But they also didn't seem totally sure. My mom was shaking and my dad was mostly quiet. They said that he was taken to a room with a lot more newborns and always slept there. He was barely in my mom's room. My parents said they don't remember if there were any tags on him with his name or their names. They think there weren't tags on him. But there for sure were tags in the little baby's cribs in that room. But of course, if they put the wrong baby in the wrong crib, that was it. They said that basically he was born, they cut the umbilical cord, kinda wiped all the stuff off of him, put him in my mom's arms, and then quickly took him away. The next time they saw him he was much cleaner and softer, and they say he didn't have some sort of white film on him. He seemed like the same baby, but in my opinion, after seeing him maybe 10 minutes at most right after birth with the crazy amount of hormones and adrenaline on both sides, would you really be able to recognize a newborn? I don't know. Anyway, that is the update. My parents assured me he was conceived naturally and that my mom gave birth to him. I believe this is the truth. They were way too shocked and emotional for it to be a lie. We bought a bunch of new tests. Ancestry for my dad and 23andMe for my parents and my brother. Also, my dad said he would investigate how to do paternity and maternity tests with a doctor. They will tell my brother today. They'll tell him and then I'll give him access to the account I'd made for him on Ancestry so that he can freely look at his results and do what he pleases with his DNA. Well, like I said, that conversation with my parents happened on Saturday. Yesterday on Sunday I visited them again and they seemed very disturbed. Very worried. So I am concerned about them and my brother, and I really hope that whatever the results are to the other DNA tests, that nobody loses their minds. I think my parents will love my brother just the same. He is their son. But I know that if he isn't biologically theirs, it means that there is a person out there that is biologically their son. My parents will go crazy trying to find him if that's the case. And it's Venezuela. Feels impossible to find someone there. And he might not even be there considering all the migration the last years. And what if he had a bad life? A bad family? I don't know. I'm so worried about this, so I can't even imagine how my parents feel. As for my brother, I think he will take it well. He's really strong, understanding and smart, and he never cared about blood, he's always said as much. I think it will shock him and disturb him as well, but I don't think he'll go as crazy. If the results are negative, I'll make sure to be there for him if he needs me and be the best sister I can be. Update 2. It's been a week since our last conversation, and everything has been a whirlwind. The additional DNA tests arrived faster than expected, and the tension in our house is unbearable. My parents have been acting strange. My dad, who's usually so composed, keeps looking through old photo albums and hospital documents from when my brother was born. My mom has barely spoken, just stares into space a lot. I catch her sometimes looking at my brother with this mix of love and confusion that breaks my heart. Yesterday, something unexpected happened. My aunt, my dad's sister, came over. She wasn't supposed to know anything, but somehow she found out. When she arrived, my mom was in tears, and my aunt just hugged her for what felt like hours. They spoke in hushed tones, and I overheard something about that summer in the hospital in Caracas, but I couldn't make out the details. The DNA tests are currently being processed. We chose Ancestry for my dad and 23andMe for my parents and brother, hoping the cross-referencing might give us more clarity. My brother seems surprisingly calm. He told me, "Whatever happens, you're still my sister. Family is more than just genetics." His maturity is both comforting and heartbreaking. What's most troubling is the growing suspicion about what might have happened in that hospital in Venezuela back in 2004. My parents are from a small town in Galicia. They moved to Venezuela temporarily for my dad's work. The healthcare system was chaotic then, and Venezuela was going through significant political and economic challenges. My mom finally shared a fragment of a memory. She remembers a moment right after my brother's birth where she felt something was off. A nurse she didn't recognize, a brief confusion about which room he was taken to, a strange feeling she couldn't explain. But in the chaos of childbirth, with exhaustion and overwhelming emotions, she dismissed those thoughts. The indigenous Americas, Colombia and Venezuela part of my brother's DNA results keeps haunting us. Where did those genes come from? Was there a mix-up? A deliberate switch? Or something even more complicated? We're all waiting. Waiting for tests. Waiting for answers. Waiting to understand what really happened on that day in 2004 when my brother was born. I'll update again once we have more information. For now, we're just trying to hold ourselves together. Update 3. The 23andMe and Ancestry results arrived yesterday, and nothing could have prepared us for what we discovered. My dad's Ancestry test confirmed what we already knew, or rather, what we thought we knew. His genetic profile matches exactly with our family's Galician lineage. But my brother's results? They're a bombshell that has turned our entire world upside down. His 23andMe test not only confirmed the previous Ancestry results but provided even more detailed information. The indigenous Americas, Colombia and Venezuela percentage is precise, 44.3%. The South Italian component is exactly 12.4%. And most shockingly, there are 0 genetic markers connecting him to my parents or me. My aunt, the one who visited during the last update, finally broke her silence. During a tense family dinner, she revealed something that has been buried for years. Apparently, in the summer of 2003, my parents experienced a devastating loss. My mom was pregnant before my brother, and she lost that baby late in the pregnancy. The details were always hushed, always painful. My mom couldn't hold back her tears when my aunt spoke. She confirmed what was slowly becoming clear: they had gone through an incredibly difficult time. The loss of their first child, the emotional trauma, the desperation to have a child, it all started to paint a picture. We're now almost certain that my brother was adopted, but not through any official channels. The theory gaining ground is that my parents might have accepted a baby through an informal arrangement, possibly through a connection at the hospital or through someone who knew about their loss. The most heartbreaking part? My parents genuinely believed he was their biological child. There was no intentional deception, just a profound, desperate love that made them accept a child as their own. My brother is processing this differently than we expected. He's been researching Venezuelan adoption practices from that era, looking into hospital records, trying to understand his own story. He told me, "I want to know the truth, but this doesn't change who I am or who my family is." We're now planning to hire a private investigator in Venezuela. It's a long shot, considering the country's ongoing political and economic instability, but we need answers. Who are his biological parents? Why was he given to my parents? What circumstances led to this extraordinary situation? The genetic disconnect is clear, but the emotional connection remains unbroken. If anything, this revelation has made our family bond even stronger. More updates to come as we unravel this mystery. Update 4. I never thought our family's DNA mystery could get more complicated, but life has a way of surprising you. The private investigator we hired in Venezuela, a former police detective named Javier Martinez, uncovered something none of us could have ever anticipated. What began as a simple search for my brother's biological origins has transformed into a story that sounds more like a novel than reality. 2 weeks ago, Javier sent us an encrypted file with scanned documents from a small hospital in Caracas. Among them was a birth record that made my blood run cold. The document referenced a complex medical situation involving my parents, a local doctor named Elena Rodriguez, and a series of events that happened in the summer of 2003. My mom finally broke her silence completely. She told us the full story, a story she had kept hidden for almost 2 decades. In 2003, she was pregnant with her first child, a boy. But during her 8th month, she developed a rare and dangerous condition that threatened both her life and the baby's. The local doctors in the small Venezuelan town where my parents were working at the time told her the chances of survival were minimal. But Dr. Rodriguez had a radical solution. She was part of an experimental medical program that was exploring unconventional methods of saving high-risk pregnancies. The details were murky, but it involved a complex procedure that could potentially preserve the life of the child through an alternative method of gestation. My parents, desperate and terrified of losing their first child, agreed to an experimental procedure. What happened next is where the story becomes almost unbelievable. The medical records suggest that genetic material from my mother was combined with a donor, someone with indigenous Venezuelan ancestry. The goal was to create a viable pregnancy environment that could potentially save the child. But something went wrong. The original child did not survive. However, the experimental procedure had already created a genetic template. And somehow, miraculously, a child was born. My brother. Dr. Rodriguez disappeared shortly after my brother's birth. Her medical license was revoked, and she became a ghost. The hospital records from that period are fragmented, with entire sections seemingly intentionally destroyed. When we tracked down Dr. Rodriguez's daughter, now living in Miami, she revealed that her mother had been part of a controversial medical research program exploring genetic preservation and alternative reproduction methods. The program was funded by a combination of private investors and a shadowy international medical research foundation. My brother's unique genetic makeup, the exact 44% indigenous Venezuelan ancestry, the unexpected Italian markers, wasn't a random occurrence. It was the result of a deliberate, scientifically engineered process. We're now facing a series of mind-boggling questions. Was my brother a medical miracle? An experiment? A child created through technology that was years ahead of its time? The genetic testing companies are now intensely interested in his DNA profile. My brother's reaction has been surprisingly calm. "I'm still me," he told me. "Biological or not, engineered or not, I'm your brother. I'm their son." My parents are a mix of shock, relief, and lingering trauma. They're consulting medical ethicists, genetic counselors, and lawyers. There's a possibility that the medical foundation responsible for this experiment could still exist. We've decided to dig deeper. Javier is continuing his investigation, and we're preparing to potentially go public with our story. Not for fame, but to understand the full extent of what happened. The most surreal part? Dr. Rodriguez's daughter mentioned that her mother kept extensive research notes. And she believes those notes might still exist. Our family's simple DNA test has opened a door to a world of medical ethics, experimental science, and a story that challenges everything we thought we knew about reproduction and genetic engineering. Update 5. Something extraordinary happened today. Something that changes everything we thought we knew. Dr. Rodriguez's daughter, Camilla, arrived in Spain last night. She brought with her a set of old leather-bound journals that belonged to her mother, hundreds of pages of meticulous medical notes, research logs, and what can only be described as a scientific diary documenting the most controversial medical experiments of the early 2000s. The journals revealed a backstory far more complex than we could have imagined. Dr. Rodriguez wasn't just conducting random experiments. She was part of a carefully orchestrated international research program focused on genetic preservation and advanced reproductive technologies. The program was funded by a consortium of anonymous investors, medical researchers, tech billionaires, and what appear to be government-affiliated scientific institutions from multiple countries. My brother's creation wasn't just a medical miracle. It was a carefully planned genetic experiment. The most shocking revelation came on page 247 of the third journal. A detailed entry describing a specific genetic template, one that matched my brother's exact DNA profile. The notes referenced a Project Prometheus, a codename for a radical genetic preservation initiative that aimed to create genetically resilient human templates capable of surviving in extreme environmental conditions. My parents were unwittingly part of something much larger than a simple medical intervention. They were participants in a cutting-edge genetic research program that was decades ahead of its time. Camilla explained that her mother had disappeared after the project was abruptly shut down. The last entry in the journals suggested that someone within the research consortium wanted to terminate the program, and potentially eliminate all evidence and participants. We've started receiving anonymous communications. Encrypted emails. Cryptic messages. Someone knows we're getting close to uncovering the full truth. The genetic testing companies have shown intense interest in my brother's profile. We've been approached by multiple research institutions offering substantial funding to study his unique genetic makeup. But we're cautious. After everything we've learned, we don't trust anyone easily. My brother, incredibly, remains the calmest among us. "I'm still me," he keeps saying. "Whatever happened before I was born doesn't change who I am now." We're assembling a team. A genetic counselor, a medical ethicist, a lawyer specializing in international medical research laws, and Javier, our private investigator. We need to understand the full extent of what was done to my parents, to my brother, to us. The journals hint at other participants in Project Prometheus. Other families. Other children potentially created through similar experimental methods. We're just beginning to understand the scale of this mystery. Update 6. The past week has been a nightmare of revelations and increasing danger. 2 days after our last update, Our house was broken into. Not a typical robbery, nothing was stolen. Instead, someone had carefully gone through our documents, specifically targeting anything related to Dr. Rodriguez's journals and the genetic research. The only thing missing was a specific page from Camilla's mother's third journal, page 247, the one that detailed the most critical information about Project Prometheus. Javier, our private investigator, confirmed our worst fears. Someone is actively trying to suppress the information we've uncovered. He found traces of professional surveillance, microscopic tracking devices in our electronic devices, subtle signs of digital intrusion that suggest we're being watched by someone with sophisticated technological capabilities. The anonymous communications have escalated. We received a USB drive with encrypted files. When our tech expert finally cracked the encryption, we found a series of medical records and genetic profiles. Not just my brother's, but 5 other individuals with similar genetic markers, all born within a 2-year window in different parts of South America. My brother's unique genetic profile isn't just a scientific anomaly. It appears to be part of a larger, more systematic genetic engineering project. Camilla revealed more about her mother's work. Dr. Rodriguez was part of a multinational research group exploring genetic adaptation. Their goal wasn't just medical preservation, they were attempting to create human genetic templates capable of surviving in extreme environmental conditions. Climate change, potential planetary catastrophes, space colonization, these were the driving motivations behind Project Prometheus. The most chilling detail? Each of the 5 other genetic profiles we discovered shares specific markers with my brother. They're not just similar, they're deliberately interconnected, like pieces of a complex genetic puzzle. Our family is now divided on how to proceed. My parents want to protect my brother and keep everything quiet. My brother wants to find the truth. I'm caught in the middle, knowing that each step we take might put us in more danger. Yesterday, a black SUV with tinted windows was parked outside our house for hours. When Javier approached it, the vehicle disappeared within seconds. We've been advised to be cautious. To protect ourselves. But how do you protect yourself from something you don't fully understand? The genetic testing companies that were so interested in my brother have gone silent. Our calls are not returned. It's as if they've been instructed to disappear. We're preparing to take our investigation international. Camilla has contacts in medical research circles in the United States and Europe who might help us understand the full scope of what was done to my brother, to our family. One thing is becoming increasingly clear: Project Prometheus was never just about medical research. It was about something much bigger. Something that someone is willing to go to extreme lengths to keep secret.